Well, hello there, team. Richard Tubb here, back again with another episode of Tubb Talk, the podcast for managed service providers. Now, it was way back in episode 29 of Tubb Talk. I had the pleasure of speaking to one of my great friends and great mentors in this industry, Arlin Sorensen. And we talked back then about why discipline and planning are vital to success in business and life. Now, that episode was one of our most listened to this day and most commented on ever. It still holds up today. So if you've not heard it, I'd highly encourage you go back and listen to Tubb Talk 29 after today's episode. But hang around, first of all, because many years on from that episode now, a lot of things have changed in the managed service industry. But one thing remains absolutely the same. Arlin Sorensen is one of the smartest, most respected and admired individuals in our entire industry. So it's my great pleasure to have Arlin return as a guest today so we can hear from him on how life in the MSP industry has changed since we last spoke. Arlin, welcome back to Tubb Talk, my friend. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, Rick. It's great to be with you. And you forgot one of the key parts of my intro. I'm one of the oldest guys in the managed service industry.
You're not old, you're just wise, my friend. That's the way I would put it there. So how are you keeping? We were just talking just before we came on air. You're in a hotel room in
Cedar Rapids, Iowa, the eastern side of the state. So about 4 hours from the farm.
Yeah.
And I'm slowing down a little bit. So we're on a little family reunion trip and spending time with my wife and her family.
Wonderful. Well, say hello to Nancy from me. In fact, we were saying just before we came on air, one of those earlier, that podcast episode we talked about, we recorded, it was a hotel room in London, wasn't it? And Nancy was just off camera, and we cajoled her at one point to get involved in the podcast as well, didn't we?
We sure did. And she still remembers it.
Oh, well, bless her. For better or worse, she still remembers it there. But I mentioned during your intro, of course, that you've been one of our most popular guests ever on this show, but for anyone who isn't familiar with your body of work, people who don't perhaps know who Arlin Sorensen is, give us a potted history of your journey in the MSP space.
Well, I came out of university as a farmer, returned to the farm to work with my dad and brother, and bought an Apple II Plus back in 1982 and fell in love with technology. And that was the beginning of my IT journey. I started a VAR MSP, ran that for 27 years and sold it back in 2012. And then along that journey started HTG Peer Groups, which today is IT Nation Evolve. So I've been deeply involved in the industry for almost 40 years now, and have loved every minute of it. I also have started a ag tech business that focuses on delivering precision technology to farmers, and recently sold that in January. So a lot of technology, a lot of agriculture, and I like to blend them together because they're a great match for one another.
Well, I always quote you, my friend. I speak to MSPs all around the world in different geographies. And I don't know if you've ever come across this, but I speak to some MSPs and they say, yeah, Richard, the advice you're giving me here, I'd imagine it works in the big cities, but where I am, nobody wants managed services. Nobody buys it. And I always quote you, Arlin, as saying, you should look at my friend Arlin Sorensen. He has been in one of the most rural locations and built a booming MSP business. So do you ever get that? I'm not going to call it an excuse, but that opinion from people in certain geographies?
I'll call it an excuse because that's what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, I hear it all the time. And, the reality is that if you take care of the customer, you deliver great service and have solutions that will help people with their problems, doesn't matter where you're at. We were in the middle literally of a cornfield in Iowa, and all of a sudden we've got a $17 million business with 5 locations across the Midwest just because we took care of the customer. And so where you're located is not an excuse. It is just an excuse. If you are doing the right things for your clients, life will be good.
Absolutely. And so much more to talk about from your MSP journey. But let's go to the present day for a moment. Your current role is, if I get it right, VP of Ecosystem Evangelism at ConnectWise. Remind us, who are ConnectWise? What does your role entail there?
So ConnectWise is a software manufacturer. We have about 30 different solutions primarily for the MSP TSP market to help our partners, run successful businesses. And ConnectWise Manage is probably our PSA is probably the most noted software tool we have. I use that in all three of my businesses as we were growing them, and it's a great tool to help manage and maintain control of what's going on in your organization. My role has been, the title, I don't always know exactly what that means, but what I do every day is really have conversations like this and help partners succeed. That's really what I'm charged with, is listen to partners, help them understand how they can grow and achieve their definition of success. And it really is still related to what we talked about back in episode 29. Planning hasn't changed. It's still vital and critical to success. So that's the kinds of things that I get to do. I was in Dallas all week last week facilitating 3 Evolve peer groups last week. And, partners still face a lot of the same challenges, and we're going to walk beside you and help you achieve what you want to accomplish.
Yeah, I find it fascinating. I was mentored. You've been a great friend and a mentor to me, learned so much. And I've gone on to share some of that this side of the pond with other MSPs I've spoken to. Can you believe it's been 13 years since I sold my MSP business, and you were talking about your longevity in the business. But I still get surprised to a degree, and I really shouldn't be. But what was old is new, and the evergreen knowledge that I've learned from you and picked up throughout my time, it's still relevant today. So the managed service business has changed incredibly, but fundamentally, it's still the same, isn't it? Looking after people, as you said.
Yeah, it's all about people. I mean, we work with technology, but we're in the people business. And whether it's our clients or it's our employees or the vendors we work with, we're all people. And that's really the key to success in running any business, actually, is to really understand that and learn how to most effectively, have a win-win relationship with all the people in our patch.
Yeah, we're going to talk more about managed service providers specifically. But before we move on, ConnectWise is a prominent player in the MSP space. You might argue the most prominent player in our industry. What, in your opinion, having worked with ConnectWise so long now, what sets ConnectWise apart from other solutions and tool sets? How have you seen ConnectWise contribute towards the success of MSPs, including your own?
I think the real differentiator is community, the IT nation. And that was a vision that Arnie had way back when he started the company to really engage with those that used our products and services. And, the IT nation has grown and become a bigger and bigger part of people's success over the years. That's the business unit that I'm a part of today, and am proud to be a part of that, because it's different than anybody else in our industry. And a lot of people have attempted to create some kind of community, but the IT Nation is unique. We've got a number of events that are, purpose built for MSPs. We've got a lot of content that's available. We've got a number of people like myself that it's our job when we wake up in the morning to think of how we can help partners be successful in the IT Nation. And so I do think ConnectWise is in a very unique spot and has got an asset that no one else in the industry has or ever will have, because of the investment it takes to make it real.
We've seen a lot of change during time. Certainly, during your time running an MSP to where we are now, a lot has changed. A lot has stayed the same, as we say, the fundamentals. What are some of the most common challenges that you see MSPs facing today that perhaps we didn't face when we were running the business?
Well, I'll start with the most common challenge that we did see when we were running the business, and that is sales. It's still the challenge, and it's changed. Today there's a lot more digital and online kinds of attempts to sell, but the reality is that still many MSPs, even ones coming in as new MSPs, are technically focused. That's where they grew up in the industry. And sales was not their nature. It's not what they've done in the past. And there's a struggle there. It's a challenge. And so, we've rolled out a number of tools through the IT Nation to try to help fix that piece of the MSP business. And the bottom line is, Rick, owner-led sales really is the answer up until probably at least $5 million in revenue today. It's higher than it used to be because the costs of people are so much more expensive. So a lot of owners want to throw sales over the fence to somebody and let them take it and run, and that just doesn't work until you've got enough size and scale to actually put together a little team of folks that can help each other make that transition.
Yeah.
The other things that have changed are many. We sold basically network infrastructure services back in the early days of managed services, and along comes cloud, along comes AI, along comes RPA, along comes lots of changes in the journey in terms of what we're supporting. And then the environment in terms of tools available for marketing today are completely different than they used to be. The pandemic really threw us a curveball in terms of how we engage with the public and our client base. And so we've had to make those adjustments and learn how to do things online and across the wire. And so there's a lot of things that are different, but there's still a lot of things that are the same.
Yeah. Going back to the pandemic, obviously terrible time for everybody in the world. Looking back now, though, do you feel as though there was a shift, a change in people's attitude towards technology? And as a result, would you even go as far as to say that the MSP industry is perhaps in a more mature place now as a result of the pandemic?
I would definitely say that we're in a more mature place and in a prevalent place. We learned during the pandemic that without technology, the world kind of comes to a screeching halt.
Oh,
And
yeah.
so the MSP's place in the world today is in a much more important role than it was before the pandemic. And that there's also some challenges that came with the pandemic, primarily the workforce and how it's going to engage, with remote or hybrid or whatever other flavor of it today. A lot of companies are still trying to figure out how are we going to get our employees back in the office? How are we going to serve customers more effectively? And there's such a spread in terms of what people's expectations are, in the market for a job and for customer service. So it's definitely changed the world. I don't think we're going back to where we were pre-pandemic. So we're going to have to learn how to adjust and make the most of what the new environment's going to be going forward.
I've got an interesting question. I was having a conversation with a couple of MSPs at dinner last night here in the Northeast in England, and we were talking about the changes the pandemic brought on and, how their business has changed. And lots of MSPs, as well as their clients now, of course, moved to a remotely connected team. Something I've learned from you early on in my industry was, for want of a better word, etiquette, the way you carry yourself, professionalism within the industry and that. And of course, I'm a firm believer, until you actually get taught these things by somebody and you were gracious enough to teach me, you don't really know it. And the MSPs I was speaking to saying they feel as though since the pandemic, people doing calls like this over Zoom, their members of their colleagues, their members of the team, staff, sort of lost that level of professionalism, rocking up for Zoom calls, perhaps eating on camera. We're both smiling because we've both seen examples of this. What's your thoughts on that? And how can we raise the bar and say to people, look, just because we're working remotely doesn't mean we're any less professional?
Well, yeah, it starts with an attitude, right? And realizing that the job is the same, whether we're doing it across the wire or we're sitting across the desk. And so, that it's got to start with our own personal attitudes. I think the thing that's really been the struggle, Rick, with post-pandemic workforce comes down to management. And it's more difficult to manage people, across the wire than it is when you're sitting across the desk. But that doesn't reduce the need, and certainly I think it goes up as we're trying to do it remotely. We have to be intentional about the interactions we have, and And a lot of that professionalism is caught more than taught, right? I mean, you can remind people about it, you can talk about it, but it's how we exhibit it and demonstrate it to those that we're managing that's really the key. And so, that's one of the things we're doing a lot of with ConnectWise right now is really making sure our managers understand the difference in managing remote people versus people that we're going to see face to face every day, because I don't think those days are going to come back for many. There's going to be at least hybrid environments, and we have to manage. Just because they're not with us doesn't mean we don't need to manage our people. And so that to me is really going to be the key of our ability to kind of get this thing back on track again. Is managers have to manage. It's kind of easy to just walk by folks and by the pure presence there was a little management going on. You don't have that when you're on the wire, and people are doing business that way. So we got to be intentional about it. We've got to really learn what it means to manage people remotely, and then we just have to do it over and over and over again.
Yeah, you speak to a lot of MSPs worldwide, some very successful ones that are starting out. What tips would you give those MSPs on managing their team if they are remote?
Well, I would encourage them to get their people trained. Number one, there's definitely skill that goes along with managing people remotely, and most of us have not experienced it, so we need to learn it. It's always been an observation that we'll spend thousands and thousands of dollars getting people trained technically, but when it comes to skills training around how to manage and how to be more effective in our job as a knowledge worker, we really don't like to spend money on that. And it's a little bit backwards. We need to teach the people skills first, make sure that people are able to really interact well with clients and others so that they can be effective in their roles, and then put the technical skills behind them. But that would be my guidance in terms of how to manage remotely: is get educated, read the research, understand those that are being successful, and do those things. It can be done. There's no question about that. But it's a different mindset, and certainly requires, I think, more work, because you have to be more intentional and more regular in terms of that interaction to really manage well.
Yeah, and I know you mentioned earlier on a lot of managed service provider businesses are run by primarily techies. I know I'm a techie geek. You mentioned the Apple too, where we're
Yep.
sat here. I'm surrounded by technology in my little retro museum with Apples and Ataris and Commodores. But all joking aside, us techie people, management, of course, we struggle with that, going from a technician to being a manager. But the other one I want to rewind a little bit is you said about sales. And I see this tendency, as you said earlier, that sales is tough for technology people to come to terms with. And the tendency is almost to abdicate responsibility and say, I'm going to hire a salesperson and that's going to fix the situation. Elaborate on that a little bit more. We know that doesn't tend to work, but what can that techie business owner do to raise their sales skills, to become comfortable with sales even?
Well, it is a skill, right? And so again, it's an education thing, and that's one of the areas that ConnectWise has been investing deeply in. We've released what we call our growth kit, which is really a sales learning tool to help partners learn the skills required to be effective as a salesperson. And it really starts, Rick, with what's in your head. Most MSPs, and maybe most is too strong of a word, but a lot of MSPs psych themselves out around sales.
Yeah.
They don't like it, so they don't put a lot of effort into it, and thus they fail. And so they decide then, well, I'll just hire somebody to do it for me, and we don't set them up for success. We haven't done the preparation in terms of the necessary materials for them to take and talk to prospects. We haven't done the lead gen to give them a list of folks that are potentially good prospects to go see. We just don't set those folks up for success, because as a technical owner, we really don't understand how to do that. We just do it ourselves because we're able to make it up on the fly when we're in the field, because we've done it for so long. we hire these salespeople, and what I see happen a lot is that they'll go out to a prospect and they'll sell something, and they'll come back to the office and say, "Hey, I sold customer A this particular thing," and the first thing that an owner will do is slap them on the hand and say, "Well, we don't do that."
Yeah.
That's not how you encourage a salesperson. They're a little bit sensitive in their ego, and we have to set them up for success, and that means having all the marketing things in place, educating them well, shadowing and working with them. But I really don't see it really being effective until you can afford to have a couple of people kind of on the sales team. An individual salesperson is pretty unique to be very successful on their own. So that's why, my guidance has kind of upped to where you need to be at least a $5 million company before you're really ready to start a sales team. Up to that point, owners just need to embrace the fact that they are the key salesperson. They can surround themselves with some sales support, people that might do the quoting and those kind of things, but the closer, it's going to be the owner, and they'll be the most effective closer there is. And embracing that is the first step to really having a successful sales engine.
Yeah. And one of the tools that you equipped me with way back in the day, which I'm still so grateful for to this day, was the book and a relationship. The book was The Go-Giver, and the relationship was with our great friend Bob Burg and John David Mann, co-authors of that book. And I've, I make no bones about it, make no apologies. There's barely an episode of this podcast goes by, Arlin, where I don't mention Bob Burg and the book. In fact, me and my great friend Philip Morgan, we were saying the other day, we should be on commission with Bob in Europe because something. So, but that all comes from the relationship that you introduced me to Bob and that work originally, and almost turning the tables on sales. And like, sales is not about persuading somebody to buy from you. Sales is about helping them. So tell us a little bit more about why the Go-Giver spoke to you, and how it spoke to you in terms of changing your attitude towards sales.
Well, I mean, people buy from those that they know, like, and trust, right? And trust is a big part of success in the sales world. And so, the Go-Giver really turns the tables from I would say popular thinking that it's all about me, when in fact it's all about the prospect and the customer. And if we're really going to be effective, we've got to change our mindset to how are we going to deliver extreme value to that person that we're trying to sell something to, and not what's my commission going to be because I convinced you to buy something that will line my pockets. Bob and John wrote a beautiful little fictional novel there, and it really struck me. It's become the culture book for HDG and Evolve, and the way that we really guide our peer groups and try to help people understand success is not about you. It's about how you serve the customer that you want to have a relationship with. And business is all about relationships. At the end of the day, we are in the people business. That's what we do. And we need to embrace that and understand how to make that relationship not just deep but long. That's really the key to successful businesses. They create deep relationships with their clients, and they serve them over a long period of time. And that happens because people understand how to have those relationships. And Bob and John wrote a great little book to help us understand some of those principles.
Yeah, well, thank you again for introducing me to Bob and John's work there. He's become a great mentor, and I stay in touch with him quite a lot. And as I said, there's barely an episode of this podcast goes by where we don't give a plug for the Go-Giver, but with good reason, because it's such an impactful book there. So yeah. So let's turn from relationships to tech a little bit now, a subject we both love still speaking about to this day. You talked earlier about something, automation, RPA, those type of things that are coming through. We're seeing them emerge into the managed service field. Where do you see automation and RPA, AI, tools of that nature? Where do you see them helping the managed service industry, and what are the great dangers of them?
Well, RPA is gonna help us automate a lot of somewhat menial tasks that we end up having to do over and over again for our clients. And I think that's going to develop over time to be fairly effective. We're gonna see things, in the office that we also do regularly that we'll be able to create automation around. And I think there's a lot of discussion today around how impactful that will be. It'll make a difference, but I don't see RPA replacing people. Certainly not completely. It's more of an assist tool. And I think the key is going to be identifying those areas that people consistently are doing over and over again that can be automated, and put that in place as an assist to that individual and give them some time back to use on things that maybe are more important. Technically, I think there's a lot of things that we'll be able to automate and put to use, and that's one of the areas that ConnectWise is really focused on, is identifying those things and enabling those as quickly as possible for our clients. AI is going to be a little bit different challenge, I think, though. It's got tons of potential. There's no question about that, and even in its infancy stages today, I use AI every day to do certain things, and Copilot is a great tool for helping manage the flow of information in and out of inboxes and those kind of things. But it also comes with some risk, and I think that's probably the area that MSPs need to get educated on, rather than just kind of turn the faucet open and letting it flow. If data is not well managed, if it's not well fenced in, if it's not protected and understood, the potential for runaway AI information is significant. And so, I'm encouraging people today to learn to do assessments of that data and manage it and get it ready to a place where that when AI gets turned on, it won't become a runaway train that we're trying to put back, in the barn. It really has huge potential, but it also carries huge risk. And we've dealt with security risk for a number of years now. I think AI is going to deliver us a new kind of risk that we're going to have to manage. That will potentially have a different kind of destructive path if we aren't well educated and understand how to keep that under control.
I couldn't agree more. And I think there's a ton of potential for AI with managed service providers to automate, but we can't lose the human element. We've also got to be aware of, how AI can be used to deceive people as well. I recorded an episode of Tubb Talk a few weeks ago, which was, I never spoke a word of it, Arlin. It was entirely done by voice cloning. And I never tried to fool people. It said right at the start of the conversation, look, this is not Richard Tubb, despite what it sounds like. And yeah, I still to this day, weeks onwards, get people texting me, WhatsApping me saying, you had me. I forgot it wasn't you during that. Now I'm thinking about the implications for, MSPs. If they get a so-called call from a client, is it really the client who's speaking to the other end of the phone, and clients getting fooled by telephone calls asking them to transfer sums of money? So the potential is, for bad is there, but the potential for good is there as well, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And, that was a conversation that we saw it evolve last week, is, how are we going to validate that when we get a phone call, it really is the customer and not somebody else that's trying to do something malicious. It's gonna cause the whole security landscape to be even a bigger risk, because it's another tool in the tool belt for the bad guys, and we're going to have to learn how to address it and how to adjust to it. But I think people at least are aware of that risk, Rick. What I think they're not aware of yet is really the impact of access to data, and how we haven't really had to protect or manage our data all that effectively. I see a lot of servers with data all over the place, not managed. Nobody even knows the data they have, realistically. And for AI to not become a problem, we're going to have to understand where the data is, who should and shouldn't have access to it, how we're going to put controls in place to make sure that is the way it works, and all those kind of things. And it's a new skill set for partners. We haven't really dealt with those kind of things in the past. we just put more and bigger hard drives into servers and let it pile up. That's not going to be a good thing for the AI world, right? Because it's going to go find all that stuff. And whether we forgot about it being there or not, it doesn't really matter to AI. It's going to find it. And so, that's an area that I think a lot of partners need to really begin to learn and understand. And, key vendors like Microsoft and ConnectWise are beginning to educate and put securities in place around that. But partners have to learn how to actually leverage that. And it's a great new opportunity from a business perspective too.
Oh, yeah.
If I was a sales guy, I'd be drooling all over AI. As the technical manager, I'd be saying, no, you can't do that. You can't do that. We're not ready yet, but we need to get ready because it's coming.
Yeah. And I noticed in the first quarter of this year, we're recording this in May 2024, first quarter of this year, Microsoft revenue went up significantly. And, if you read between the lines, a lot of that is because, they're implementing Copilot, they're selling it. People are saying, yeah, this is great. I want to use it because it does make life easier, but it comes with those challenges. But still on the subject of automation. So I shared on social media that you and I were speaking today. You were coming back on the show as a guest. So we had some questions coming from our listeners. Naturally, people want to hear your wisdom, Arlin. So here's a good one from James Steele. James says, what does the balance between automation and human interaction with clients look like amongst the most operationally mature MSPs that Arlin has worked with in recent years? Do you experience companies pushing it too far, maybe sacrificing customer experience as a result of automation?
Well, automation is never going to replace relationship, right? And you don't build trust with automation, which is the foundational, kind of pillar to having a great client relationship. So, I think the key is to use automation. QBR preparation is a great example of a place that potentially, automation can be of use, but the delivery of that needs to be done, person to person, face to face. And that's going to be, I think, one of the real differentiators in terms of maturity between partners is those that are able to understand how to use automation kind of in the background to prepare and enable their teams versus those that just want to use it to completely deliver and replace a lot of the things that their team are doing with their clients. We're always going to be in the relationship business. It's a business based on trust, and that means we've got to spend time with clients face to face, really listening, because AI, while it listens, it can interpret and understand and provide direction. And we've got to hear our customers and respond to them appropriately. So to me, it's a matter of those that are going to be willing to invest in their teams to help them skill up, because it is a new skill set for us. It's a different kind of environment and sale and service opportunity. But we've got to invest and learn. We've got to create the guardrails of what we're going to sell, right? This could be one of those things that salespeople will drool over because the expanse of what you could do with it is unlimited, basically. That doesn't mean you have the necessary background and capability to deliver it well and in a way that's useful. So we're going to have to learn how to create bundles or packages or solutions based on AI that are in our wheelhouse. But I think the key is the ability to identify what needs to be face-to-face, person-to-person, and how can RPA and AI be used to enable those relationships behind the scenes and cut the QBR prep time, from 8 hours down to a couple hours or whatever the case might be. There will definitely be great uses for it, but we're going to have to be intentional about how we do it and make sure we never lose sight of the fact that we are in the people business.
Mark Schaefer, the author, says the most human business wins. And I still love that phrase to this day, because I think it's going to be able to, AI automation going to be able to support us in what we do, but it's not going to be able to replace what we do. It's always got to be, filtered through the human at the end. So you've been doing this a long time. We talked about it, I've been doing it a long time as well. What's something, the biggest mistake perhaps that you see MSPs still making today that you consistently see them making? What's something that sort of makes you shake your head a little bit and going, oh, I wish I could get across to people a little bit more about that mistake?
Well, it goes back to episode 29, Rick. People don't plan.
Right.
And, it's one thing not to have a plan, for what we're going to do tomorrow or next week or next month. The big mistake, and we're seeing it in spades right now, is that as people are getting to the point of where they want to make a transition out of their business, they're not ready. They haven't created adequate business value to enable them to sell their organization and have the life they want to have post event. And the fallacy that that most people seem to fall into is this idea that if I just get up and work hard every day, someday somebody's going to write me a check that will take care of my future. And people just they don't buy hard work. They buy business value. And so, value creation is a journey. It's not the kind of thing that you can wake up and say, hey, I think I'll sell in a couple of years and fix a fact that you've run the business for 25 years and haven't really created value. Now, it's supported you. It's provided you the cash you've needed to live, take care of your family, send your kids through school. But again, people aren't going to pay for that, right? They need something that's spinning off free cash flow on a regular basis, because that's how they're going to pay for this thing.
Right.
And so, if there was one thing I could change about our industry, it would be this whole mindset of my number one job as the owner is to create business value. That is my job. No one else is going to do that. I've never met an employee that said, hey, I wake up in the morning and I wonder, how am I going to make this business I work for more valuable? That's not how employees think.
It's not.
Their thought is, hey, what do I have to do to get a paycheck this week? So, owners have got to take responsibility for that. And, I can't tell you how many calls I get from partners that are saying, hey, I've been doing this for 30 years now. And my wife and I have been working together in the business, and I'm tired. I'm ready to get out. And I've tried to sell it, but it seems like people are trying to take advantage of me. They don't want to pay what I need it to be worth. And we have a conversation about what kind of EBITDA are you spinning off from your company? And it's adequate to live on, but it's not adequate in terms of creating value. And so that's the thing. And I'm doing a lot of work through ConnectWise right now around M&A and transition, and trying to help people understand this concept, because, to effectively do it, at least in the US here, there are certain strategies that you have to have implemented for at least 5 years before you can actually leverage them in a transition. There's very few partners I talk to that are thinking that far ahead. And that's so unfortunate, because it's going to cost them dearly when they get to the point of wanting to get out of their business. And, I've seen lots of folks that have sold their companies, but then they had to go get a job because they didn't have enough money to live on. And so unfortunate. It doesn't need to be that way. There's lots of ways you can create value, but you have to be intentional about it. If we aren't, we'll spend the money. We won't save it. We won't have a plan for how we're going to create it. And we're going to get to the end of our journey and say, oh my goodness, I should have done some things, and we didn't.
Yeah. Well, thank you for teaching me about planning back in the day. So I followed that advice, and saw that through. Can we speak about legacy for a moment? Another aspect of planning. I've been very happy with, my transition from being MSP owner into, helping people, doing what I love, spending time in this wonderful community of ours, which does help one another, a great deal. But for anybody listening, perhaps legacy is, dare I say, almost a morbid thing for them. Oh, I don't want to think about how I'm going to be remembered when I'm gone. How would you speak to them from that perspective?
Well, first of all, financial legacy is a key piece of legacy, right? So value creation and those kind of things are part of it, but that's certainly not all of it. And The thing that I think is most important to remember about legacy is that legacy is created while we live. A lot of people think, well, it's just something that happens when I die. There's this list of stuff that's going to occur, and it'll just happen. Legacy happens while we live, because there certainly is a list of tactical things that make a difference, but the impact of our lives is really what legacy is all about, and that happens through day-to-day life, day-to-day interactions and relationships. And you can't, again, wait until you're laying in a hospital bed on your last part of your life, and all of a sudden magically have all this wonderful things happen in terms of relationships if you haven't cultivated those and really poured into them all along the journey. And so, legacy is probably the most important thing to be intentional about. And, it starts with those we love and are closest to, but it extends, through our communities and our interaction with people all over the place. And we have to have a plan for how we're going to be intentional about that. So it is, in my opinion, the most important thing for us to think and plan for. It's the foundation for the way that we view planning, through Evolve. Legacy is the foundational plan. It covers what we want to leave in terms of our personal legacy, but also our business legacy. But from that, then we have 3 annual plans that kind of support that. We have the life plan, which is what we're going to do with our life during the next 12 months. We have the leadership plan, which is about how we're going to grow our own leadership skills, but also pour into our teams and the people around us that support us. And then we have the business plan, which is what are we going to do with our business over the next 12 months? If people will really, lean into those plans, build a strong foundation through a legacy plan, and then annually put in place those 3 other plans, they'll get to the end of their time and they'll have a solid foundation and be able to walk away and really live out the rest of their life, usually far better than they lived the first 30 years of their business career, because they were ready and planned for it and made the necessary decisions and sacrifices to make it real. That's my dream of success. That would make my life mission, exactly what I'm trying to accomplish. Unfortunately, that's not happening all the time, for sure.
Yeah, I also find it interesting, Arlin, that, since I learned from you about legacy planning and things, by putting the effort into planning, where you want to go, how you want to be remembered, a lot of the other stuff falls into place as a natural result of that.
Yes.
So I found great success in personal and professional life just by thinking, how can I add value to others? How do I want to be remembered? So that's an interesting sort of side effect there, isn't it?
Absolutely. Absolutely. If you learn to plan legacy, everything else will kind of fall in place, like you said. And, it seems so overwhelming. And that's where people struggle, is that, gosh, I got to think about the fact I might actually die. Well, here's a news flash. You are going to die.
It's going to happen.
It's going to happen. So we need to prepare for it. We need to realize a legacy plan is not for you. Okay. This was legacy quarter in Evolve, and this last week we had a widow come and share her story of the journey she had to go on, with a plan that her husband had created, but it didn't make sense to her. Right? We tend to write plans for ourselves through our own lens, when in fact we have to think about the fact we're not going to be here to read this plan. We're not going to be here to execute this plan. We have to write it through the lens of whoever's going to be the person that's going to actually have to execute it. And, that requires a little more intention, a lot more communication. Okay. That's the big mistake I see with planning in general, is people will write them. They just don't tell anybody. That doesn't work for a business plan if you don't tell your team what you're trying to accomplish. It sure doesn't work for a legacy plan, where you're not even going to be around to try to execute it. So, we have to communicate and we have to be very clear, but it's a gift to the people that we're going to hand it off to, and we need to write it from their perspective in language that they understand. If you think about the MSP world, we have more acronyms than, well, a lot of places, and most of them don't make sense to people that aren't in the industry.
No.
And as I look through some of my legacy planning stuff, that was a big light bulb to me. Nancy doesn't really understand some of this stuff, and I have to rewrite it in a way that makes sense, that she'll be able to interpret and use, to execute the plan.
Yeah. And talking of legacy, one of your great legacies you've already mentioned, I think, is HTG peer groups. So it was back in Tubb Talk 117, I spoke to ConnectWise's Dan Scott about how to grow your business in an MSP community like IT Nation. IT Nation, of course, grew out of the HTG peer groups. You and I, we keep referring to it as HTG. It's moved on a little bit since then, so forgive us, dear listener. It's just a habit. But HTG peer groups, the groups that you founded, Arlin, and which my own MSP was a member of way back in the day, one of the founder members of the UK side of HTG. What's it been like for you, Arlin, my friend, to see HTG evolve and, excuse the pun, grow into IT Nation?
It's been a joy, Richard. I love working with people and helping them succeed, and HTG was the start of that journey. ConnectWise came alongside us and really enabled us to go to the next level. And we're serving almost 1,000 members today through that company, and it's making a huge difference. Weeks where I go to an Evolve session, people are coming up and telling me that they would have never gotten to where they're at today if it hadn't been for their peers. And the power of peers is so important, and that still in our industry today, it amazes me that we don't see more people sign up and get involved in peer-to-peer interaction. It is the secret weapon. It's the secret sauce. When people say, what's the secret sauce to success? Get in a peer group. Surround yourself with people that are on the same journey, that hopefully some are ahead of you, some are behind you, and you can learn from those ahead and you can help those behind. That is a foundational way to be successful in this or in any industry for that matter. But a lot of people they're concerned. They don't want to let people know that they're not perfect and things aren't going exactly the way they want them to. Well, another news flash: nobody's perfect, and you're not ever going to be perfect. And the sooner you get over that, the faster you're going to be able to get it behind you and move on. So it's been a joy to do the peer groups for the last 24 years. I'm committed to continuing to do that and help move that forward going into the future, because it's where I get my joy and satisfaction, and the ability to have relationships with folks like you that really can move the needle. My goal today is to influence influencers. I'm too old to fly around the world like I used to and do things necessarily myself, but I can still share things through vehicles like this and encourage people to really dig in, get involved, and leverage peers. You're going to learn more from your peers than any other place on the planet, and you need to dive in and make it happen.
It's interesting. I also say the number one thing that positively affected me and my MSP business was peer groups. It started out with the local groups, going along SBSC back in the day and things, and then it grew into HTG, which you invited me along to, and things went along from there. But please, for anybody listening, don't try and do this on your own, because you will get there a lot faster and a lot more consistently if you're alongside your peers. So listen to what Arlin's saying here. Check out groups such as HTG. There we go again. I can't get away from that habit. But yeah, check out the interview with Dan Scott back in Tubb Talk 117 if you really want an overview of what the benefits are on top of what Arlin has said there. So I want to pick up on something that you mentioned earlier. You're doing a lot of work with MSPs around M&A. mergers and acquisitions, you said. So I think I'm right in saying that you've been through 10 plus mergers and acquisitions with your MSP back in the day. And of course, ConnectWise listeners will know have done dozens more since you've been involved in the business as well. So what have you learned about a good merger or an acquisition? And what are the red flags, the other side of the coin? What are the red flags for an MMA that you can see, hey, that's going to fail?
M&A is all about people, right? And so culture is probably the key foundational thing that you've got to get right if you're going to have a successful M&A transaction. If you're trying to bring cultures together that are too different, it'll be a challenge. And I see transactions where people will retain almost 100% of the employee base and customer base, and I see transactions where they struggle to keep any of the employees and a majority of the customers. So you got to really understand culture, and that's one of the harder parts to do when you're in kind of the discovery mode of an M&A. Now, that's a beauty of the peer groups, right? Because we get to see each other in real world experience, and kind of the walls are down when we're together as peers. And so it's why Evolve has been kind of a place that a lot of folks come looking around to find potential acquisition targets, because they know the culture of the go-giver and the foundation that peer groups are built upon. So, but that's probably the most important thing that I see happen. A lot of folks think, well, I'm not really that operationally mature, so I'm going to go acquire somebody that's further ahead than I am, and that's just magically going to infuse my team to become more operationally mature. That doesn't work either. If you're acquiring somebody, on the OML scale we use from service leadership from 1 to 5, if you're more than a digit or so apart in terms of maturity, there's going to be some pain trying to bring those things together. And while you might think we're going to elevate everybody, that's not really what happens. Everybody kind of falls down to the lowest common denominator. So, you've got to do your homework. It's easy to do a transaction. It's not easy to make that transaction really turn out well. Integration is the hard part for sure. And you got to have a plan for how you're going to do that. But you got to understand what you're up against, and don't set yourself up from failure from the get-go. There's certainly potential reasons why you might do an acquisition of a organization that's less mature or culture's not quite a match if you're trying to get specific skill sets or individuals. But you gotta understand what you're doing and have a real plan for what that looks like. I made some great acquisitions, and I had some total disasters in my own journey. And you never know exactly what you're going to find when you do a transaction. I would say that in the last 12 months or so, due diligence has gone significantly higher in terms of what's going on in the market. And a lot of that's related to interest rates and the cost of money and how that impacts, the math behind an acquisition. But, there's just very little room for error today in terms of not knowing what you're actually buying and how it's going to integrate with your organization.
I still use the term MSP, managed service provider, but I notice even during this conversation, yourself and others at ConnectWise, Dan Scott and others, seem to use the term TSP. Is that a conscious decision? What is a TSP, and how do you see that?
Yeah, it is a conscious decision, and the solution provider market is broader than just managed services. So, we think of it in terms of, office equipment dealers, as being part of this industry. We think of it in terms of audiovisual dealers or resellers. We think of it in terms of, print and so we're trying to kind of broaden the horizon in terms, because we're all doing kind of the same things. It's all recurring revenue, project kinds of businesses, very similar in nature and very similar in valuation. And so, we see the IT nation kind of expanding and growing and becoming a broader kind of thing. And I got to tell you, getting to spend time with folks in the office equipment business, they have been doing managed services, recurring revenue for much, much longer than we have.
Mm.
Most of them actually have got very mature sales organizations that we can learn a lot from. And so, we're trying to really broaden the IT nation to include all those kind of types of companies that are doing recurring revenue, so we can learn from one another and really grow together as we go down the journey.
Yeah. I know this is going to make you blush, Arlin. We've spoken a lot about managed services, but people are also interested in Arlin Sorensen, the man, and want to know more about you. So we've got plenty of questions from listeners about yourself and your background, if you don't mind answering them. And, you're a mentor, a friend, and again, it'll make you blush, but you're an inspiration to thousands of people in our industry. But who do you consider the most important influences on your professional life? Who does Arlin Sorensen turn to for advice and wisdom?
The reality is that a lot of the wisdom that I try to follow, Rick, comes from Scripture. And that is really kind of the foundational pillar that I stand on is what God has given us in his Bible is. It always works. I tell people all the time that, the Bible may not seem like a business book, but the principles in the Bible, they always work. And so it doesn't really matter if they were intended for business, but you apply them there, they're going to work. I follow folks like Andy Stanley and Craig Groeschel and others, that really blend leadership and scripture together and how to really effectively lead and manage people. Because that to me is really the key to a successful organization is, can you hire and manage your people effectively? They're the ones that are going to help you get to where you want to go. A lot of owners think, well, it's all about me and what I'm going to do. And it is for a while, but at some point you're going to hit the lid. You're going to be the cap. And if you haven't hired the right people and surround yourself with the right people, you're going to get stuck. Arnie Bellini's still a good friend of mine, and I spend time with him, and he'll tell me straight up what's going on and what needs to be going on. I try to have people like that in my life that can challenge me.
Yeah, Arnie's not backwards about coming forwards, is he? As they say.
No, he's not. He is definitely not. And the team at ConnectWise, we've got massive amounts of experience on our leadership team, so I have the blessing of spending time with Jason and Tony and others, that I can bounce things off of. But at the end of the day, it really is my peers. I still spend a lot of time with peers, folks that are ahead of me on their journey and that have had great exits, and they're trying to figure out what to do. I've got another set of peer groups that we operate called S2S, Success to Significance, which is specifically designed for people that have exited their business and are looking to figure out what their next chapter of life is going to be like. That's full. We've got 20 couples that are part of that organization right now, so we're getting it off the ground. And it's full of successful folks that have really figured it out. And so when we get together, in our peer group meeting, I get the opportunity to bounce things off of these guys that have been very, very successful and are really focused now on how do we give back, how do we make an impact, how do we take what we've been blessed with to bless others in our patch. And that's the beauty of our industry, Rick, is that it's full of really, really great people. And 25 years ago, there was this, I can't say anything because there's some secret sauce somewhere that I might let out, and people are going to figure out what I do and how, different it is. And, look, there's no secret sauce, and there are no secrets. The internet pretty well has leveled that playing field, and so we just need to get past that and realize that we're on this planet to help each other and really help drive success all around us. And so I'm surrounded by amazing people on every side, and it's such a blessing to be able to interact and build those relationships and watch them impact me as well as impact those folks.
We are fortunate to work in such an amazing industry. And I can still remember when you invited me, and I'm going to say it was Houston, Texas. You invited me to, I think it was a HTG meeting there before you'd set the UK groups up. And I walked into a room, and of course, I make no bones about it. You're, a hero of mine. And there was Carl Palachuk and so many other people in that room. And I was blown away at the time, and everybody was so warm and inviting, and it went on from there. And I see that as a turning point in my career. So thank you for what you've personally done for this industry to help foster and cultivate. The people there were ready to give, but perhaps you led the way on that as well. So, hey, I want to pick up on something you mentioned there, which was it called the S&S group?
S2S.
S2S, I do beg your pardon. So I've spoken to so many people, and I have a regular stream of people who have exited their MSPs, and they do struggle with what's next. And I find myself really, really fortunate. I knew I wanted to do what we're doing here now and the blogging and everything else. You encouraged me on that route as well. But so many people sell their MSP businesses and they don't know what to do with themselves afterwards. So perhaps you can share some details offline with me about that, and I'll include them in the show notes for anybody listening to this who's maybe looking at the next stage of their life. That'd be really interesting.
Absolutely. I mean, we've been doing this for a couple of years now, so we're getting the framework built, and we have a scorecard. It's different than the one we would use with an Evolve, but what we find happening is that people have been so entwined with their business that their identity and their purpose really became tied to that business. And once they've exited, that's gone. The people that they interacted with on a daily basis, they don't do that anymore.
Yeah.
And so the mistake that I see get made is that all of a sudden now we're home, and we decide we can help manage the house maybe a little better than our wives are managing it, that's not the way to have a happy life. Is to become a micromanager at home. They got along without us for 25, 30, 35 years. They don't need us today. And one of the things that Arnie told me some years ago was that we get married for better or worse, but not for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. There's got to be some space, and we've got to find things to do with ourselves so that we're not creating conflict at home. Yeah. And so that's really what S2S is all about. How do we find that next purpose in our life? How do we manage the wealth that we've created? A lot of people have said having money is a lot harder than not having it. When you don't have it, you know what you got to do. You got to try to find a way to get some. When you have it, everybody else wants it. And so we've got to learn how we can manage and protect our wealth so that it'll last, and create the legacy we're trying to create. And the family dynamic changes as we go through these transitions, and we have to be ready for it. And it's just another area that we need to plan for, Rick. And if we aren't planned for, it's like going over a cliff, unfortunately. So that's really what we're trying to do with S2S, and I'm glad to share some information and the website and stuff that people can take a look at.
Thank you. We'll include that in the show notes. And something else I want to include the show notes. You thank you for speaking so openly. I know your faith is a very important driver in your personal and professional life, Arlin. And you mentioned Craig Rochelle there. Now that we're going to have as somebody who's an influence on you, we're going to have a lot of people listening to this. Some people have faith, some people, don't have a faith. But what I can say from somebody, I'm not somebody who goes to church or particularly has a faith, but I've picked up so much wisdom from friends who are people of faith. And one of the areas that I got introduced to, and I can't remember whether it was yourself, Arlin, or my great friend Philip Morgan, Pastor Philip Morgan introduced me to the Global Leadership Summit, GLS.
Yep.
Yeah, and I'll give you both credit for it. But GLS is a great organization, and they do a great event. And yeah, it's faith-based, but there was an awful lot of wisdom that I took from that, and I still to this day take from that as a business owner. So whether you're faith, not faith, anything in between, I'd encourage you. We'll include that in the show notes, the Global Leadership Summit. But thank you for speaking openly about that as well. On the same,
Well,
yeah,
one
go ahead.
one other thing I just share about my faith, I write a daily email blog that I put out. It goes out 6 days a week. And, I haven't missed a day since September of 2008. So been writing it consistently, for that period of time. And it's not magic by any stretch, but from a discipline perspective, from a habit perspective, it's one of the most important things that I've done in my life that has really impacted, my business performance. Starting the day, thinking about what I learned yesterday. Reflection is one of the things that we all need to get better at, because we can learn a lot from ourselves if we just slow down and look in the mirror and figure out what happened, yesterday, last week, last month, and reflect on it. I study scripture and put a little bit of that in there. And I also include something that I've learned from somebody else in the daily update, and so I send that out, every day. If people are interested in that, we can put that in the show notes too.
Absolutely.
And I tell people, if you read all the stuff I write, there's something definitely wrong with you. But occasionally you'll run across some things that really connect, and I write it for myself. It's a discipline I need in my life to get my day started on the right foot. But with technology, it's easy to share that, and so it goes out to about 850 people around the globe every day. And glad to include anybody that's interested in being on that as well.
We'll include that in the show notes, a link to that, which is a great resource. And I've got to say, Arlin, I get some lovely comments from people in the industry talking about consistency. Again, something else I learned from you. I've been writing my MSP insights every Tuesday to the industry, email that goes out there, Observatory video, and these podcasts. People say, where'd you find, the inspiration to keep going, to be so consistent? Been doing it for years and years and years. I'll say, oh, you've not seen anything. You want to go and check out the work of Arlin Sorensen. There's a man who's really consistent. So 2008, was it? You said you started writing that blog.
That's the last time I missed.
Oh, 2008, last time you missed. When did you start writing it?
I started writing back in 2004.
Wow.
So 20 years ago. But I had some skips and misses. The mistake I made was I got up in the morning and said, do I really want to write today? And, you can't do that. I mean, habits have to happen. And I got challenged by a person that was on my list saying, why do you think it's okay to skip a day? If you say you're doing this daily, then you got to do it daily. And he was right. And so since 2008, even when I'm in the hospital or whatever, I put out something. And I haven't missed since September 2008.
Incredible. That is truly inspirational. And just on a personal note, do you find that writing process helps you clarify your thoughts, become a better thinker, a better speaker? Because that's what I found. And again, something else that I picked up from you, I write the blog as much for me as for anyone else. Does it help? What's your thoughts on it?
Exactly the same. When it has to go through your fingers, it clarifies things.
Yeah.
And certainly when I write, I go back and I rewrite, because what came out my fingers the first time wasn't exactly what I meant. But, the process of writing is a discipline that I think has got huge value, because it does help us learn to clarify, learn to be, make things simpler, more understandable, all those kind of things. And yeah, it spills into every area of our life. And so it's an important skill, and I find it a real blessing, personally, for myself.
Yeah, I think I heard an interview the once with the great golfer Tiger Woods, and somebody asked him after he'd made some remarkable shot, got a hole in one or whatever, and they said, "Wow, how did you ever achieve that?" And he says, "Oh, I've done that thousands of times before," but he'd done it in his head. And I think writing for us is perhaps the same type of thing, Arlin. So
Yep.
I've had probably like you, I've been at events and somebody stuck a microphone in my face or said, "Hey, can you just do a quick 10 minutes on this?" And afterwards, we've talked about things and they say, "That's amazing. Is there anything, that you don't know?" I say, "Oh no, I've, all I was doing is basically regurgitating something that I'd written and thought
Yeah.
about a long time ago." So I think a great lesson to anybody listening to this is, do more writing, because it enables you to be prepared for any questions from clients, from employees, speaking, anything like that.
Absolutely. It is a powerful discipline. And, if you turn that into a habit, it will serve you well.
Yeah. Question for you. I think I know the answer to this one, but because we've already spoken about it a little bit. What's the book you've most gifted to other people and why?
Well, without a doubt, it's a Go Giver.
Yeah.
Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of copies of the Go Giver. And the reason why is because it is filled with principles that really impact relationships and people. And it's 5 simple principles. Probably the number 5 is the one that people struggle with the most, which is if you want to really be effective, you have to learn to receive. Most of us kind of push back on that, and we want to be self-sufficient, we want to do it ourselves. The thing I had to learn about that was that when I say no to receiving, I'm preventing somebody from being a giver
Yes.
and robbing them of that joy and opportunity. And so, I find that book, number one, it's a quick read. So I like quick read books, but it really has powerful examples and principles in it. And, you know, eh, again, it's not intended to be a faith-based book, but the principles that it talks about in there are scriptural principles, right? The Bible identified those 5 things in Scripture, and so I know it works. I know if people will read it and live it, it will work for them, and it's the foundation for the evolved peer groups and the way we do things. Every new member gets a copy of the Go Giver in their initial interaction with us, because that's how we want peer groups to work. It's people that come to a meeting thinking, what can I do to help Rick get to where he wants to go? If we all enter a room together with that mindset, we'll all leave with so much value that we won't be able to measure it.
Mm. Is there a belief or a personal position that you've done a complete turnaround in recent years, Arlin?
Yeah, there is. And it's kind of a little bit goofy, but
Go for it.
for many years I kind of made fun of snowbirds, right? And a snowbird in American terms is people that live in the north of the US and go to the south in the wintertime. And I thought that was, it's not necessary, right? You tough it out. Growing up as a kid in Iowa, snow was part of life, cold was part of life. And so I made fun of those folks for a long time. And when ConnectWise acquired us, and I needed to be in Tampa some of the time in Florida. We bought it. We bought a townhome so that we'd have a place to stay. And for the first few years, we just would come back and forth. And I was not going to give in to the old snowbird mindset. But last year, we decided to come down and right after Thanksgiving in end of November and stay through March. And I got to say, it was a glorious time. Waking up every day to 70s and 80-degree temperatures, being able to go outside and enjoy, the outdoors. When I know back on the farm, they were pushing snow and freezing to death. It was great. So that is a complete flip flop that I've made. I'm going to embrace that for the rest of my life and enjoy the warmth. I've decided I don't need snow anymore. I can be very happy without it. And so it's a little goofy, but it's going to be a great quality of life as a result.
I love it. And I don't know how long you and I have been friends. And I love the fact that to this day, you've still got the ability to surprise me with some of the things that you say. So thank you for that. Hey, we're coming towards the end of our time, Arlin. Just before we go, though, a couple of questions I want to ask you. One, a bit more frivolous, but another one about the industry. What does Arlin Sorensen do for fun outside of business?
Well, the thing I enjoy the most right now is I've got 4 grandkids, aged 12 to 18. They are active and involved, and we love going to their sporting events, to their music events. They're all musicians, and just participating and being part of the chaos that lives in that household. They live a quarter of a mile up the road from us, and so it's just a blessing to have family close and be able to participate in those things. We just celebrated my grandson's graduation on Saturday. So, it's hard to believe. You blink and all of a sudden they're graduating, but we want to dive in and continue to spend our time doing that. I love to take photography, pictures. So, that's kind of blends with the grandkids thing, but working on our ancestry information and collecting and gathering and trying to organize that. I do enjoy doing that with my daughter Lori. But a lot of the time I'm just around people and sharing and interacting with them. That's probably the greatest joy I have, is just the opportunity to sit down with somebody and learn about their life and hopefully share a nugget or two that they can use to help add value.
Wonderful. And your ancestry, do you mind me asking if you found roots back to Europe yet?
Oh yeah. We're Danish. Yeah. We have on one branch of our family, we go clear back into the 1600s. So yeah, we've done a lot of research, and the majority of my roots are in Denmark. We do have a little bit in England.
I knew there was something I always liked about you, Arlin. I knew that was
we're brothers in some form or fashion.
So looking ahead, what do you see as the future of the IT managed service industry, Arlin? And how is ConnectWise positioning itself to thrive in a future landscape?
Well, the MSP world, TSP world is going to continue to be an integral part of this world's economy and success. We're not going backwards. So it's going to continue to be more and more important. I think the big shift is going to be, and has been, moving from make my stuff work to make it create value. We have to focus on business outcomes. AI and RPA are great tools that will enable us to do that, but we have to get way past just making things function. We have to get to the point where we're in a relationship with our client to where we understand what they're trying to accomplish and we leverage technology to help them get that done. And so it's going to require us to have some different skill set on our teams, especially in the VCIO kind of roles where people are charged with understanding what the customer's objectives are, and then we can identify how technology can help make that happen. But that to me is kind of the next phase of this thing. Digital transformation has got to become a reality. The cloud has to become a reality. We've been talking about this stuff for years and years, and it's slowly migrating there. But to enable all this stuff to work together, we've got to really get our arms around it all and get it all in one place. And that's what AI, I think, is going to force us to do. Number one is, at least in my world, I've got stuff, here, there, and everywhere, and it's not manageable. It's not really useful that way. AI is going to force us to organize it, to put it in, in places securely where we can manage it and then leverage it and drive outcomes. And that's really, I think, where we're going.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. You have delivered so much wisdom, so many insights, so many resources during this conversation, Arlin. You've given freely of your time and experience, as you always do, and which we value so much. We'll include in the show notes for this episode at tubblog.co.uk everything that Arlin has spoke about today. But as a final sort of parting bit of wisdom, Lots of people are going to listen to this, and you've given them food for thought for a lot of different topics. What's the one piece of advice you'd give to any listeners to take action on before they finish listening to this episode? And before you answer, I'm going to say I mention your quote so often to other people, and people attribute it to me. And I would say, no, it's not my quote, it's Arlin Sorensen's. And you taught me that vision without execution is hallucination. And people love that quote. So what one piece of advice would you ask listeners to take action on?
Well, first of all, let's give credit where credit's due. That's Thomas Edison's quote. Okay.
He's not around to argue.
I know, but I'm not smart enough to figure that out on myself. I mean, the one thing that needs to happen for all of us is planning. If I could wish anything for everyone, it would be plan, spend time planning. And, the quote from Patterson Center around that is, if you plan the work and work the plan will work. The differentiator I see, be it in running an MSP or living a life, the main difference is people who plan achieve what they want to accomplish. People that don't, they may accidentally get there, but it isn't because they had a plan or a strategy or took any specific action. So create a plan, start somewhere, and it's a journey. You're never done. That's the thing about planning. It's not we can write this magic thing, put it in a notebook, put it on the shelf, and it's going to happen. That's not how it works. It's a consistent, ongoing discipline that you have to put in place, but start with a legacy plan and then get good at how you use your time. That's the most important gift we have, is the time we have. We can make more money. We can learn more skills, but we're only going to get 168 hours every week, period. And there's nothing you can do to change that. So use that time effectively and intentionally based on a plan. The biggest value of planning is it tells you when to say no. Okay. We all have got so many opportunities to do so many different things that we'll never be able to do them all. And so if you're a disciplined planner, if it's not in your plan, the answer is no. I can't do that right now. It's not, I will never do that, but I can't do it right now because it's not in my plan. And so that's my encouragement, is learn to plan, be disciplined about planning. That will help you accomplish what it is you truly care about, which is your legacy.
Amazing, Arlin. This entire conversation has been a gift. Amazing. So much wisdom that you've shared. You've had a profound impact on my life personally. So a public thank you. I'm a better person for knowing you and having you in my life. Thanks for everything you've taught me. And, hopefully through this podcast and others, I've helped to share a little bit more of that this side of the pond here. But thank you for your friendship and mentorship. Really appreciate it. And thanks for the time today, Arlin. If anybody listening wants to continue the conversation with you, what's the best way for them to reach you?
Email, well, LinkedIn, you can certainly use, or Facebook. My email address is arlin@arlinsorensen.com, and glad to continue the conversation with anybody that would like.
We'll include all the details in the show notes. Arlin, thanks for joining us today. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Rick. It's always a pleasure to spend time with you, and it's been great to watch your career and watch you bloom and really make an impact. So thanks for letting me see that in real life.
Thank you, my friend. Appreciate it.
Hey folks, Richard here. Thanks for listening today. I know you've got a ton of options for who you listen to nowadays, so I really appreciate your support. Do you have any feedback on this episode? Ideas for future guests? Tweet me at Tubblog using the hashtag TubbTalk. I respond to every tweet and really appreciate your feedback.